Hey everyone, this is our review session for yesterday's class, which was February the 3rd, 2025. So we'll just go over some of the major points today, one of them being animation retargeting. We retargeted that elf yesterday, and we're going to do that in this review, but I would like to show you another method with a character that I brought in that has no animation. And this is a character that you can get from the marketplace for free. I think it's called Adventure Man or Adventure Guy or something. So to find that, we're in our root content directory, and we've got this folder here that says Man. We can double click on that and then find the skeletal mesh. So double click the mesh folder. And there is a modular version of this character, but there's also a full version that shows the entire body. So let's go ahead and inspect this mesh and figure out which one we like. Make sure that you're reading the labels at the bottom of each thumbnail. Not all of these are skeletal meshes, even though they may look like they are skeletal meshes. So let's say that I'm interested in this one where the character is fully equipped. And it'll compile shaders there for a minute. Didn't take long. Okay. And yeah, this one is not an animated character, does not come with, I don't think, an animation blueprint. But I would like to use this character, at least temporarily, in the game for demonstration purposes. So I think we will. Now, we do know already that when we go into play mode, or I think what I'll do is I'll use play in editor, and that way when I maximize my viewport, I will have full screen. And we spawn in as Quinn, as you know, and Quinn can idle. It's very subtle. And Quinn can run around, and Quinn can jump. And that's right now, that's about it, okay? But we want to animate this character and use this instead of Quinn by default. So let's do it this way. We're going to go back into our content directory. And I'd like to point out that if we look at our BP underscore third person character, which is the default character in this template, those blueprints live inside of this third person folder. So if I double click that and I go into the blueprints directory, I will find BP underscore third person character. And I can open that up in a moment, but I want you to know something else. The reason that we spawn in as this character is due to two reasons. One reason is that we have what's known as a player start actor in our world. Okay, so that is important. You can place your player start actor into your world, and that's going to determine where the default character is going to spawn. But which default character is going to spawn is going to be something that you'd have to set up in your game mode. And there is more than one way to do this, but I'll show you something that is convenient for other reasons as well. I'm going to use my window menu, and I'm going to search for World Settings, which is right there, World Settings. When I left-click that, it usually docks itself right here next to my Details panel. Now, we rely on the Details panel for quite a lot of things, so every now and then, and even I make this mistake, is I might be looking for something, or even searching for something that I know exists in the Details panel, and I get all confused because I forget to switch over. So let's go to World Settings for a moment, and we can see that our selected game mode, if we twirl that down, our selected game mode is, in the game mode override, it's the BP third person game mode, and that is this, okay? And inside of that game mode, we can specify the default pawn class, and that is BP underscore third person character. So let's mess with that just a little bit. I'll double click to open it up. And most of the work that we can do in this right now, in fact, I will dock this to make it a little bit easier to see, is if we go over to the Viewport tab, We know that a character blueprint, one of the major features that it contains is the skeletal mesh component. And that is, in this case, the body of Quinn. That's her skeletal mesh. It doesn't have to be Quinn, because when I have the mesh component highlighted, I can go to the Details panel and select a different skeletal mesh asset. For example, I could select Manny. I'll just type a search for Manny, which is the other one that comes for free. And I want to make sure that I hover over the various duplicates that there are, because I did bring in other asset packs into this project that have their own versions of the Manny skeleton. So you want the one that is in the characters directory, and it's this one up at the very top, or the second one, Manny Simple, will also work for you. And as soon as I click on that, you'll notice that the skeletal mesh is changed, but it is not going to move appropriately because it is still using the animation blueprint that is associated with Quinn. I would like to change that and instead use this one, animation blueprint ABP underscore Manny. And when I click that, at first you'll notice a change of posture. Okay, so we've got a different skeletal mesh, and we've got the animation blueprint assigned to it that was designed for this particular skeletal mesh. And if I compile and save, this is not a new character. This is still BP underscore third person character, and that is still our default pawn class in this game mode. But since I have a player start in my level, as soon as I hit play, I spawn in as Manny instead of Quinn. All right. But eventually you're going to get sick and tired of playing as Manny or Quinn. So why don't we do this first? Let's go back into our content directory. And I want to remind you that there are various skeletal meshes of the man here in the mesh folder under full. And I want to remember that it's full. You could use any of these you want, I suppose, but full underscore 04 is wearing the most clothing, and perhaps is the most interesting looking mesh of the bunch. So I'm going to go back into our content directory for the time being. And actually, no, I didn't mean to back out quite that far. Into man. And here in the man's directory, I'm not going to disrupt any of the current folders that already exist. What I will do, however, is right-click. And when I right-click, I can go up here to where it says New Folder. So what I'm doing once more is I'm finding some blank space in here, right-clicking and choosing New Folder. And I'm going to title this Retargeted Animations, again with no spaces. If you wanted to, you could put an underscore, but this is fine. Since I might be retargeting animations from multiple sources, I like to keep the contents of this folder also organized. So let's double-click this, and I'm going to make a few subfolders. One of them is going to be New Folder. I will call it Rigs, and you'll see what that's all about shortly. The next one I'm going to call Animation Sequences. And then one more, which is going to be called, well, you could call it ABP, but I'm going to be explicit and call it the Animation Blueprint. Okay, because we remember that every character has to have a character blueprint that contains its skeletal mesh, and it has to be of the character class because we rely on the character movement component for locomotion and speed and things of that nature. And we also need an animation blueprint to assign to that character so that it animates properly according to whether it's running or walking or jumping or any other type of animated movement. Right now, all 3 of these folders are empty, but it is my intention to retarget from the Manny character onto this man so that I can use this man with its own animation blueprint as our playable character. So to do this, I'm going to go back to the content directory and scroll back to where it says characters, double click. And under mannequins, if I double click that, you will see a folder that looks familiar. It too has a rigs directory. And if I double click that, I can find certain assets which are called retarget assets. This is the one that has the prefix RTG mannequin. Okay, that's a good one to use. And we're going to actually make our own. We have in that same subfolder a folder that contains not only Manny's animation blueprint, but all of Manny's animation sequences. Now, frankly, I can right-click any of these. I can right-click any of them that I'd like and go up to, oops, my recording controls are in the way, so I've got to move them. That'll happen every now and then. But I'm going to go into, back into characters, mannequins, animations, Manny, and right-click any of these animations. It doesn't even matter which one you choose. And I'm going to just select from right-clicking, retarget animations, and that will bring up our animation retarget. Now, this is an example of the new automatic retargeter that comes with Unreal Engine version 5.4 or later. I will tell you that the process of full retargeting was much more complicated in versions that preceded 5.4 and even more complicated in Unreal Engine 4. So a lot of folks, if you watch tutorials on YouTube, etc., are going to show you a method of doing this with as little clicking as possible. But I would like to show you sort of a hybrid approach that's going to make this be a little bit more reliable for us. So the first thing that I want to do is to select our target skeletal mesh. So we've got our source skeletal mesh. In this case, I want it to be Manny, and I want it to be the right one. So let's see if I can scroll up and find it, or I can just type in Manny. And I want to make sure, again, that I get the right one. You can see by following the path that this is not the right one. I did not mean to click that, excuse me. So I'm going to have to wait that out. Okay, so let's go back to the retargeter. Retarget animations. Okay, so this was meant to be Manny. I clicked when I didn't mean to click. Okay, so you can see just by looking at the path, I'm hovering. So when I look at the path, this is just a version of that skeletal mesh that came with an animation pack that's included in this project. But I want to look for the one that is in this directory, Game Characters, Mannequins, Meshes. So it could be Manny Simple, or it could be the full Manny, but Manny Simple is going to do just fine. Okay, now I need a target skeletal mesh, and I do remember that part of the name for that combined mesh for that man was full. So I'll just type full. That should make it pretty easy for me to find that. Okay, here's skman full 04, and I'm quite sure that was the one. You are going to be tempted to do the quick and easy method, the quickest and easy method of just retargeting these all of this stuff in one go. I'm going to recommend that you don't quite do it that way. So we've prepared some folders inside, subfolders inside of this man's parent folder. What I would like to start with is just not reporting, but exporting the retarget assets. And you'll see what they are as soon as I do this. So when I click export retarget assets, it presents me with a little way of navigating to where I want to deposit them. So I'll scroll down to man, and now is when we remember that I made a retargeted animation subdirectory, and then inside of there, I made a folder called rigs, because it's the rigs that I'm interested in at this moment. So if I then click export, it will deposit 3 assets into my rigs directory. And you can see there they are. I'm going to close this retargeter for the time being. And we've got these 3, which I can highlight and Control S or Command S to save. And I've got 2 what we call IK rigs. And IK rigs are basically just chains of bones, basically. If we look over here at the IK retargeting, they come from the skeleton, and they specify where a certain bone chain begins and where a certain bone chain ends. And this has to do with what's called inverse kinematics in animation, as opposed to forward kinematics. So for example, if this were, and what we see here with these boxes, these are what are called end effectors or IK goals. You'll notice that if I were to grab hold of one, actually I have to select the bone, I beg your pardon. So let's select in the hierarchy, if I can find a hand. Okay, so here's the right hand. And if I use the transform tool and I move this around, I want you to see that it's not just that part of his body that's moving. It's the whole body, or everything that is in the hierarchy of that particular chain. And it is sort of like backwards solvent from there. Forward kinematics does not do that. Let me reset the pose. Okay. This makes it easier to do very lifelike animations, because I just put the hand where I want it to be, let's say on a steering wheel, and all of the joints that come before the hand, their transforms are set accurately. So inverse kinematics are spectacular. So I now have this IK rig, and the only reason it needs to be resaved is because I messed around a little bit with its hand. So let's resave that, and I reset the pose before I resaved it, so everything is still okay. And it also has an IK rig that is from our Manny character, and the bone mappings were matched exactly. Okay, so this will be like a 1-for-1 type of sort of transfer of the animations that we want to use. And that's important. Pose matching and making sure that the IK chains are the same for the target and the source. It also prepared for us something called an IK retargeter. Now, this is really where the magic is going to happen, because when I double-click this, what you're seeing right now is a little bit funny looking, because we're seeing the target and the source sort of superimposed on top of one another. To get rid of this problem, what we can do is go over to the right side of the screen where it says Target Mesh Offset, and it looks like this is on the x-axis. I'm going to move it over about 140 Unreal units, okay, so that they're standing side by side. And that looks great. There are some things that we can do. I want to enable IK up here in the retarget phases. And if I stop running retarget, what I can do is I can make sure that I'm clicked on the target button here, and then click the auto align. You may not see anything happen because it usually does a great job on its first try. I just clicked align all bones, and it looks like the feet were adjusted just a little bit. As a matter of fact, maybe I can undo that, okay? And I'll do it again, auto align, align all bones, beg your pardon. So it looks like the feet were a little bit off. And then sometimes you'll find that the feet are not really snapped to the ground very well. So also under this auto align button, you can choose snap character to ground if it looks like their feet are under the floor or above the floor. And we can get very, very granular with this by selecting individual joints and individual bones if we don't think that the poses are matched well enough. But I think that this is going to be good enough for today. So now that we've got our two poses, we can start to preview how well the animations are going to translate by moving down to the right corner of the screen. And instead of looking at the chain mapping, we can look at the asset browser. Now, I want to look at the animation sequences. So I will use this, which is a filter, and I can filter just animation sequences. And now I can search for things like idle. idle stands for male mannequin idle. That's Manny. And MF idle stands for mannequin female idle. So just based on the body type, I'm going to choose this one and double click it and preview it and just make sure that it looks good. And I think it does look good. And let's do something else. Let's look for walk. Okay. Walk in place. Oh, yeah. These are going to travel off the screen, and the walk in place is used in a certain way. The ones that have the transform of the character moving, those are not in-place animations. You'll hear them sometimes referred to as root motion animations. And we'll get more and more into those distinctions as we go on. But I'm just checking to make sure that the most important, especially the locomotion animations, seem to be working. Let's try jump, jump, double click. Okay, so that's looking terrific, and this is as easy as it's ever been. I'm going to reset my filters, and now I'm pretty confident that these animations are going to transfer very, very well. So at this point, I'm going to, again, filter for animation sequences only. I can now select any of them I like, and then do a select all with Control A or Command A, and I can export them. So with all of those selected, I'm going to export selected animations, and where are they going to go? Into the directory that I made for them, which is here in Man, Retargeted Animations, Animation Sequences, Export. And you don't have to check anything here. You're just going to click on Export. Now, all of these animations are retargeted to that skeletal mesh's skeleton and will play properly on it. Now at this point you can see they're all highlighted and there are asterisks which are telling us to save, so I'll do a Control S. And I find that sometimes it doesn't do them all, even though they're all selected. So what I recommend in that case is just to double check, do another select all, and then Control S one more time so that everybody gets saved. And of course, at any time you could do a save all and make sure that you're not leaving anything out. So if Unreal happens to crash, you're not going to lose any progress, for example. Finally, I would like to retarget the animation blueprint that comes with Manny, and I can find that back in the characters directory. So I'm in my root content folder, and under characters, I'm going to find mannequins, animations, and ABP Manny. Okay, and we'll right-click that, and we're going to retarget those animations, and we're going to do it the same way. I will search for full, and I don't want the druid in this case because she also is called full, but the man. Okay, and in this case, I don't really need anything here. All I really need is the animation blueprint, which is going to be somewhere in here. I'd have to look for it. Animation blueprint. Let's see, did I do the right one? ABP. Oh, I'm sorry. It's right. It was right in front of me at the very top. ABP Manny. Okay. So we are going to export that using this button as well. And that is going to go and be deposited into the man's retargeted animations, animation blueprint folder. And what will come along for the ride are the locomotion animations that were used in that blueprint. So we'll click export, and there they are. Okay, so now what I want to do is highlight all of these, do another Control S, and make sure that they're all saved. Wouldn't hurt to do another save all, but I don't think anything has changed since then. So in Manny, in ABP_Manny, you can open up that animation blueprint. And what we can do is we can see that actually this has compilation errors. So we might have to do something a little bit different for this. You can see that the control rig hierarchy is got some, because we haven't assigned a control rig to this character yet. And that's where I can see the problem is. So for the time being, if you see this, just for the time being until you know a lot more about control rig, we have to look at a different part of the animation blueprint called the anim graph, which is located right here. So double click that, and you're going to see this thing called control rig. What we want to do is temporarily bypass this. I wouldn't take it out of the graph entirely, because once you do know about control rig, you're going to want to probably put it back. So you can option click or alt click on those two controls and get this out of the way and simply connect these together like so, compile and save. And now we don't have any errors. It compiled just fine. Now if I hit play, I'm still going to be Manny. Right? But we're going to make a new character. So let's go back into our content directory, and the character blueprints are located here in the third person folder. So we can double click third person, go into the blueprints directory, and this is our default pawn class as determined by the world. The default pawn, the game mode that's in the world settings. So we've got the default pawn class is BP_third person character, which we have not changed, and I don't recommend really changing that yourself. But to make new characters, you can right click it and duplicate. And I can call this one BP_man. And I can go in there, double click that, and go head over to the viewport, find the mesh, and change out the skeletal mesh asset. Now the mesh component has to be selected first in the components panel, and then we'll find whichever version of the man, full 4, that we want to use. And you'll notice that his posture isn't quite right because he's not using the animation blueprint that we just created for him. So I'm going to leave this docked for the time being and go back into the man directory. Let's see, man is right there. And in retargeted animations, there's an animation blueprint folder, ABP_, it's still called Manny. I want to rename this so that it goes along with this adventure character. So I can right click and I can rename. F2 will also do this. ABP adventure guy. Okay, you can call, adventure guy. You can name it ABP_ is usually how you'd start that. But if I go back to the duplicated character blueprint, now with the mesh still highlighted, I can specify the animation blueprint here under animation mode, use animation blueprint. It's wearing the wrong animation blueprint. So I can change this to ABP adventure guy, and now his posture is correct. If I compile and save, now I can go back to my main view, and I can have that character, which we just duplicated and created here in third person blueprints. All I have to do is now highlight that. Okay, it's selected. And I'm going into my game mode here where it says default pawn class, and I'm going to use my favorite button of all in Unreal Engine, which is this little arrow with a circle around it. You'll find many uses for this. It says use selected asset from content browser. So I can just pop that in there. And now it's going to be my BP_man that spawns in wherever my player start happens to be. Go ahead and play. It's probably compiling some shaders or something. Okay. It's still thinking. This will stop stalling in just a second. Maybe I just need to give it a minute. Stop. Play. Part of it is I'm getting low frames because I'm doing a screen recording at the same time. But we'll see. Okay. So there's our dude. He can run. He can jump. He could do all the things that Manny or Quinn could do after this retargeting. Now, I do have some footfall sounds. Trying to play non-additive land. Okay, this error, if this happens to you, if you get something like this, what you might want to do is, well, first of all, read it. Trying to play a non-additive animation land into a pose that is expected to be additive. In the instance, blah, 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 persistent level man. Okay, I'm going to look for what that animation was. This is probably not going to happen to you, but just in case it does, one thing that you can experiment with is to find the offending animation that it referenced there, and that's going to be in man, probably in the retargeted animations animation blueprint folder, because this is all of the locomotion stuff. And I think it was land. So it's either the one that it complained about or the one that is just before it. But let's go into land. I think that's what it said. Let me just see if it's still there. land. So let's open that up for a second. This is an animation sequence. And what you can try is to search for the additive settings. And right now it says no additive. So let's just change that to local space and save and see if I clear my warnings, if that happens again. Okay, that fixed it. All right. So sometimes if you just carefully read the log, it'll kind of tell you some of the things you need to do. And indirectly, you might find out about certain engine features that you didn't even know were there. So now you know one thing that you can do if you ever encounter an error similar to that or a warning similar to that. Okay, what else do I have in here? I brought in some audio assets, I think. Imported audio. I made this folder. And inside of there, I have some footsteps. You may not hear them because they're a little quiet, but 6 of them that we already recorded and edited down. So what I can do is I can make these all into one sound cue. A good way to do that is to select the first one and then shift-click the last one. And with them all highlighted, you can right-click in the empty area, go way up to the top, and you can say, create single cue. Oops, they got unhighlighted somehow. Okay, right-click. What's happening there? Maybe I've got to right-click on one of them. Yeah. Create single cue. And what that will do is it will bring them into a single sound cue graph editor, all connected up to a randomizer. Okay, so I'll call this footfall 1Q. I have no reason to rename it, so let's open that up. And it plugged each one of them into a randomizer, which is great. One thing that we could do is, well, first of all, let me just point out that each one of these was technically a different footfall. And if I play the cue over and over again, the specific footstep that's going to play, I think I'm going to bring up the volume here to something like 2. are already randomizing, but we can make it even more random so we never hear the same sound twice, more or less, by including a modulator before the final output. If I use a regular modulator node, remember that for every iteration of that sound, it can play at a slightly or greatly different pitch minimum and maximum, or different volume minimum and maximum. The default values are pretty good, but you could play with them yourself. You could say like 0.9 and 1.1, or do something else, but you can audition that here. I think that this one here, I think it got a little bit too high pitched. So I'm going to go back to, and in the modulator, yeah, it was 1.1. That's where I set it. So I'm going to set that back to 1.05, because I thought this one, when it played, occasionally had too high of a pitch. Okay, so this sound cue is ready for use, so I'm just going to click Save, and remember that we've got it. Now remember, in order to hook up these footstep sounds to the animations, we have to use what are called skeleton notifies. So let's go into our man's directory, and all of the locomotion assets are stored inside of this retargeted animation blueprint folder that we made. Now, I want to point out that you need to read these carefully. This is the animation blueprint that has the anim graph and whatnot. And let me show that to you. Okay, we just looked at the event graph, but it also has the anim graph. Beg your pardon. Oh, it's already in here, excuse me. The event graph is this, I beg your pardon. The anim graph, the most noteworthy thing I want you to notice about this are these items called state machines. And state machines contain different animation states. I was trying to double click that the player can occupy under different conditions. And each one of these states contains an animation asset. In this case, it's containing an animation sequence player for male mannequin jump. And there are variables that can control whether you can transition from one state into another. So there are other states. We go into the main states. You can see there's jump, and there's a falling animation and a landing animation. That's the one that we just fixed, by the way, by making it an additive animation. If I go into locomotion, well, let me go back one level into the main anim graph. Excuse me, double click that. The main locomotion was done here, and if I get into the idle state, you'll notice, oh, maybe not. Hold on a second. There might be one called idle walk run. That's possible. So main states, locomotion. Nope, it's not that. Anim graph. Locomotion. Okay, this one here. Okay, this is what we call a blend space, 1D. And it takes the character's speed, and we can map different animation sequences depending on the speed of the character. So this is what we cannot really make any adjustments directly in it, but we can play around with the animations that it contains. And I want you to be aware of the difference between an animation blend space and just an animation sequence when it might pertain to just one state. Oftentimes, a lot of animation blueprints do a blend space that goes from idle to walk and then to run. This one is just walk to run, so this is a simple one. So if I go back to my man's folder, we can find the blend space 1D right here. If we look at that, I can double click to open it. And I can stop this playback just by sort of clicking on the scrubber tool. And I can frame up on that in any way that I want, just using my navigation tools. And all these little diamonds here are different animation sequences. Like this one, you can see if I hover is MM run forward. This one is MM walk forward. And this one is, well, I've got to get that little gray thing off of it. So that one is walk in place. So there are 3 different animations here, and I can preview them if I hold down Control or Command and just move my mouse from left to right and watch how it blends into these different states, especially when this is running. So let's go like this. As you can see, at speed 230, that's his full walk, and at speed 500, that's his full run. It's great how they blend together. Now, this is used for if the character bumps into something and like a wall and it can't walk through the wall. We would want it to do something like that. So I'll hit save. That's not the normal idle. We have the idle as a separate state inside of his state machine. Okay, so that's working well, and I'm going to save that animation blueprint. Now, in order to attach the footstep sounds, I have to think about all of the animation sequences, at least, that make up the locomotion of this character, and they're here, right beside the animation blueprint. I cannot adjust them in the blend space, but I can adjust them in any of the animation sequences that might be contained inside of the blend space. So let's start with the walk forward. So I'll double click that to open it. And I'm going to frame up on the character's feet so that I can see them really, really well. And I'm going to stop the playback just by clicking on the ruler. Now I can use this tool as a scrubber. And I want to create a new track here for what's called a skeleton notify. These are not skeleton notifies, so don't be fooled by them. That's a different type of notify. But we're going to do this. Make a new track and add a notify track. And here we are going to place skeleton notifies that we're going to use later to make those footstep sounds play. So let's say here is a foot down. And remember, these can be added and moved around later if you think that the timing is not right. So once I find the spot, okay, let's find that spot again where his foot is definitely down. And hover your mouse directly over the vertical line, the cursor. Right-click, Add Notify, and for the first one, what you'd want to do is just use this option, New Notify. And I'm going to call it Footfall, like so. And we're going to continue until we see the next foot down. Oops. And right-click once more, Add Notify. We don't have to make a new one because we already made this one, so they're reusable. And I'm going to reuse that footfall notify for every foot down that I see. If you wanted to, you could do one for the left foot and one for the right foot, but given that they're all randomized anyway, I don't think that's particularly important. Add Notify. Footfall. Add Notify. Footfall. And Add Notify Footfall. Great. And I'm going to save this animation with those notifies inside of them. I also have to do the running animation, which conveniently is right here in the asset browser. So I can switch over to that, and I can do the same thing. So first footfall for running. I can add, I don't want to interfere with these other notifies. They're used for a different purpose, but I'm going to add a second notify track. And we can still reuse that footfall notify that we made. Add notify, footfall. Add notify footfall. Add notify footfall. Getting there. Add notify footfall. And I think there's just this last one. So we can put it right there. Footfall. And I like for there to be some sort of sound when he jumps and when he lands. So let's go to the jump animation sequence. And it's not like I'm using this more or less as a placeholder sound. I'm just going to use a notify right there and play the foot. And we're going to use it to trigger the footfall sound. We'll replace that with something later. And then also for the jump land, let's see what his feet do. It's that left foot. It's almost like I want one at the very beginning because the right foot's going to come down first. So let's add the notify footfall, put that right against the leading edge, and then maybe for the second foot, very close to it. Add notify footfall. Okay, save. Let's go back out, do another save all, because I'm sure I forgot to save a whole bunch of things while I was working. Now at this point, we're not going to hear it yet, okay? We're going to still be able to run around, but we do not hear the footsteps. All right, so let me just close some of these things that we don't really need anymore, these tabs. Okay, so now we need to trigger those sounds at the location of this character whenever those notifies take place. And this is done inside of the animation blueprint, which we have right over here, ABP Adventure Guy. I can double click that. And there are different displays here, but I want to go into the event graph in this case. And what I want to do is I want to use a node called try get pawn owner. Okay. And what this does is it is basically getting whatever character is using this animation blueprint. That's what try get pawn owner is. And we can do something like a cast to, oh, I forgot what we called him, BP_man, okay? Cast to him. Now notice that this has an input execution pin, and I want to make sure that that we call this every time he takes a step. So I'll right click here and I'll type footfall. We should find the event. We should find the event, I beg your pardon. Anim notify footfall. Okay. Now let's just make sure, we can promote that to a variable if we want a reference to it later. Okay. We'll let the variable setter set that. And I'm just going to do a print string here to make sure that this is actually getting this far. Excuse me, my recording controls have to be moved again. Sorry. Print string, and I can print whatever I want. Let's say footstep. Before I do any other hard work, I want to make sure that that's printing to the screen as my adventure guy runs around. Okay, so hopefully if you look in the upper left, you can see that indeed I'm getting an execution pulse that's feeding that print string for every footfall. And jump, there should be 1 and then 2 for landing. Okay, so that's very good news. We can now go back into here, the animation blueprint, and delete the print string. We don't need that anymore because we verified that this is working. And then what we can do from here now, as BP_man, I thought I put an underscore there. I hope I did. There shouldn't be a space. Maybe it's just not showing up here in this setter, because it is showing up here in the cast to node. Anyway, what I want to do is make this a 3D sound, because if you're another player in this game, or if I have NPCs in this game, footsteps have to originate or appear to originate from the character from someone else's point of view. So you do not want this to be a 2D sound. So I'm going to choose play sound at location, like so. And the owning actor is going to be the return value. You could just take it from as BP man if you didn't make this variable. That would also work. But what I want to do now is I want to get the location of this actor. So I can pull off of there. I could also pull off of here because it is the same information, and choose get actor location, like so, and plug that into the location pin. Now all I have to do is find my sound cue. Okay, so we'll go into content, imported audio, footsteps, and these are all wave files, but here's the cue. Now that I have that selected, I can just go up here and use my favorite button again, pop that in there. Okay, and now we should hear something cool when we run around. Okay, so I'm going to show you another cool scripting thing that we did in class. What if we want this character to be able to walk and run? Well, we need to do that in the character blueprint. I don't like that he's running all the time, so we're going to go back into our third person folder, double-click that, blueprints, and find our character blueprint. This is not the animation blueprint, but instead it's the character blueprint. So double-clicking BP_man, what I want to do now is I'm going to stay here in the event graph. Remember, if you want to look at everything, the visual components and whatnot, you have to be in the viewport. But the event graph is where we're going to be doing the majority of our blueprint scripting. And we are going to just do a little bit of very, very simple scripting so that we can toggle between walking and running. Now, I remember, and this is a good idea for you as well, I remember from the blend space, okay, if I go back to the man's directory, and I go to demo, and I go to animations, let me see. Now, that was in the animation blueprint folder, I beg your pardon. Man, retargeted, animation blueprint. Here's the blend space. I took note of what this speed was. This was 230 when he's at his walking state. Okay, that's 230. And his max speed is 500. Okay, you could change these if you wanted to. And if you do change them, they are to be changed inside of what's called the character movement component. Now, with that highlighted, I can search for max walk speed, and I can verify with my eyes that it can go 500 centimeters per second. But if I wanted to slow it down, I could change that. But what I want to do at the moment is make it start out so that it defaults to 230. So let's go to max walk speed again, and we'll have him walking by default. So we'll go 230. And press enter. Don't worry about that conversion. As soon as I compile, it's going to go right back to what it was, and save. So if I were to play this right now, he'll start out walking. Okay, but now I want to be able to control whether he's walking or running. One day we're going to get into something called the enhanced input system. But while you are prototyping things, you are also allowed to use what are called prototyping inputs, which can just be keys on your keyboard. In this case, I'm going to use the left shift key. So I right-click in an empty area in the blueprint graph, I beg your pardon, and I'm just going to type left shift. As soon as I find it, it'll be here under keyboard events. Choose left shift, and I can use my mouse center scroll wheel to zoom in. So this depends on the character movement component. You may recall I had to click on that to even find that setting. So the character movement component is where we get that information from, and I want that to be in the graph. I want that to be in the graph. Because when I pull off from here, I can set max walk speed. Set max walk speed. So that means that if I connect this execution pin pressed to this setter, I can set that to 500. Because remember, it's now defaulted to walking, right? And if I release it, I can just duplicate this. Get another setter. It also uses the character movement component, so you don't have to have that in there twice. Okay, it's the same character movement component. And I can set that to 230. So now I've got an interesting mechanic where I can walk most of the time, unless I'm holding shift. Oops, I almost forgot. The released key is going to go into the setter for setting it back to 230. So if I compile and save, now I want you to just think about this for a second. If I press left shift while I'm locomoting, while it's pressed, we're setting the walk speed to 500. And as soon as I release it, it's going back to 230. And in the default character movement component, we changed it, max walk speed. We changed it from what its default was. We defaulted to 500. So I thought it would be better if the character started out walking and only runs when we decide. So we're going to compile and save, and now we can do even more. Jump, whatever we want. Okay, so now that you know how to do that, let's do some speed retargeting and try not to make any mistakes, because I love this character. This elf druid is very, very beautiful skeletal mesh. And let's see, the one that is full, let me see, full. The one that is got the most clothes on, in other words. Let me dock this. Let me also just check my graphics settings. I want this to look as good as it can look for you. Yeah, everything is on cinematic, so that's cool. So this is a great looking character mesh. Look at the detail, on the costume, and a lot of that cloth, is movable, as is her hair. And we're going to be using this character, Aridel, who is going to be able to be an adventurer in our upcoming open world project. And she's going to have a voice. She'll be able to talk. She'll be able to have magical powers and fight with weapons and everything else that you could possibly imagine. So let's go back here, and we're going to start by remembering that this is the skeletal mesh that we want to retarget to. It's called sk_elf_druid Aridel full. So I'll just have to remember Aridel full. So let's go back now to our basic. Oh, you know what? I could have retargeted. Okay, this is an interesting one. I could have retargeted this from our same source, which is the mannequins folder. What happened to it? Characters, I'm sorry. But these animations, frankly, are just so-so. They're the ones that come with Unreal, this third-person template. So they're not really anything special. But what I did sneakily is I brought in some other things, like this female locomotion set, and I think maybe these 2 core motion animation packs, and we can retarget any source to any destination. Now, this ghost lady happens to be a character that is a little bit out of date, but it came with some great animations. We're going to be mainly using the in-place animations for this. And let's go into Move Basic, and I'll just show you. Well, she's not really clothed here, so maybe that's not the best thing to do. But we're going to make use of these animations because they're way better than Manny's or Quinn's, okay? And this also happens to have the virtue of being a UE5 skeleton. And of course, I could find that out just by going into Meshes, Characters, Combines, and if I can find the skeleton here, I can look at the bone hierarchy. Now, there are extra bones, but I can see that there are 3 spine bones, and I recognize how many bones there are in the index finger. I recognize this layout from experience, and I know that this is a UE4 skeleton. So this is going to be a very easy retarget, I beg your pardon. I don't remember what Aridel is, though. I think she's also UE4. And if she is, all the better. Okay, so let's look at the meshes there and look at her skeleton. And yep, that's also a UE4 skeleton. So that's going to be very lickety-split, very easy retargeting to do. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into this ghost lady, which I'm not using. I will show you what it looks like if you're curious. Meshes, the one that is as fully dressed as possible, combines. The separates folder is for what they call modular characters, okay? And I'd like to use the entire skeletal mesh here. So for instance, this is an example of what this character looks like, but the shaders compile a little. Maybe we'll use this. Maybe this could be an enemy in the same game, but I have other plans for enemies in the same game. But the reason that I brought this character in is because it comes with fantastic animations. And I want to hijack them for our character that does not come with great animations, but would look a lot better wearing the animations that come with this character. So let's do a retarget that way. So we're going to start by going into Ghost Lady Meshes, find a character. Actually, excuse me, we're going to go into her animations. So Ghost Lady animations in place, and it doesn't really matter, going to Move Basic, doesn't really matter which one of these we choose, okay? We can right click on it, and my meeting controls are in the way one more time, sorry about that. We can right click it and choose retarget animations. This one's going to be super easy. And apologize for that, but let's go and find our full version of Aridel. That's man. We'll find Aridel pretty easily here, I think. Had to move my meeting controls again, I'm sorry. Aridel, armor, bags, body. One of them is going to say full right there, okay? So I want to, again, export the retarget assets. And what that will do is it will create a matching IK rig for Aridel to the one that is going to actually create an IK rig for both of them, frankly, because I don't think that this one came with an IK rig. So we're going to do export retarget assets. And I'm going to navigate to Aridel, but unlike the man, I didn't make my folders in advance, but we can do it here. If I right-click on Elf Druid Aridel, I can make a new folder called Retargeted Animations, like so. And then right-click again, new folder, I can type from Ghost Lady. And then I can right-click from there, and I can do rigs. And then right-click again so that these are siblings, not nested, but from Ghost Lady, I can do new folder animations. or animation sequences, whichever you like. And then from Ghost Lady, one more new folder, and I can call it ABP. And everybody knows what that stands for, Animation Blueprint. Okay? So I'm going to then export those assets, and we're getting the same 3 that we got before. So we'll save. Next, I want to retarget all of the animation sequences using this auto-generated IK retargeter. So we'll double-click that. And again, they're sitting on top of each other. So we'll use that target mesh offset on the x-axis of 140 units so that they're not overlapping. Yeah, because it says running retarget right here. I want to just put that to a stop before I do any of this stuff. So we're going to auto-align on our target, auto-align, and let's select the target. And let's see. I don't think I have to. I can create a new pose. Oh, I've got to stop that again. So auto-align, align all bones. The feet did change a little bit, but you can see that they went underground, okay, because she's wearing high heels. So auto-align, remember that, okay? There's this thing, it's easy to overlook up here. If it's running the retarget pose, these buttons are not going to do anything. So you're going to stop that from happening and make sure that you include IK in this. So we've auto-aligned the bones, and then we can open that up again and snap character to ground, okay? So we don't have that weird issue. And then what we can do is we can export, go to the asset browser this time, and if you want to, you can filter for just animation sequences like we did before. Select all of them and export selected animations, and that's going to go into Elf Druid Aerodel retargeted animations from Ghost Lady, but into the animations directory, okay? And we will export those. And now we just have to retarget the animation blueprint that came with Ghost Lady, which we're stealing, okay? So and if you want to learn how to make an animation blueprint from absolute scratch, let me know, but you usually don't have to. Usually you can just hijack one from even Quinn or Manny and just substitute the animations. That's really the easy way. But in any case, we've got these animations. Let me highlight all of them, Control S and save. And now I'm going to back up a little bit, and we're going to find the animation blueprint that came with Ghost Lady. It's going to be in there somewhere. I think it's in place, move basic. And there is some sequences. There's a blend space. And here is the animation blueprint, which I can now right-click, retarget animations, select our Aerodel one more time. And I want to get the full, excuse me, I had to move my recording controls over. Aerodel, and I want to look for the full one. Aerodel full, that looks great. And in this case, I'm only interested in the animation blueprint and the locomotion animations that are going to come along for the ride. Okay, and that will include that blend space. So that's the animation blueprint, and this time I'm going to choose Export Animations, and that's going to go into Druid Aerodel, Retargeted Animations from Ghost Lady, but this time I'm going to export it into ABP for Animation Blueprint. Export. Export. Great. And now let's save all of this stuff. Save. Let's make a new character. We'll go to the content directory, third person, double-click that, open up blueprints, and this was the default. I don't want to actually overwrite the default, so I'll just right-click it and duplicate it again. And we're going to call this BP_Aerodel. And, of course, Aerodel's animation blueprint has to be renamed because it's still going to have the same name as the one that Ghost Lady had. So let's navigate to that and rename that animation blueprint first. So content, Aerodel, retargeted animations from Ghost Lady animation blueprint. This one, I don't want it to say, let's see, where is it? Right here, female anim BP, because that's the one that came with Ghost Lady. So let's go ahead and rename that with the new naming convention, ABP underscore Aerodel. Beautiful, okay? And now we can go back to our characters in third person, blueprints, and we've got BP underscore Aerodel, which we haven't quite finished setting up yet. So let's dock that and go to the viewport first. We obviously don't want the Manny skeletal mesh, so I'll highlight the mesh component and switch that out for Aerodel full, which will look like with a weird posture because we have not yet assigned the correct animation blueprint. Okay, so it's a little bit contorted, but as soon as I go here where it says animation, animation mode, use animation blueprint, we can now find ABP Aerodel, which we just made a moment ago, and now it looks terrific. So compile and save. And if I go to my world settings, and remember that we can set our default pawn class here, I can select, she's already selected, so I can just use this button. And now we will spawn in as Aerodel. Okay, so the shaders there had to compile. Oh, it looks like she's floating a little bit. We can fix that. But that's a much more interesting idol, I think. Looks far more alive than Quinn or Manny. Okay, so floating feet. If that happens to you, you can go back into the blueprint, the character blueprint, and for scaling, not rotation, but for scale and transform, what you might want to do is turn snapping off and use the gizmo. You could drag it down by eye, but I have some experience with this character, so I'm going to select the skeletal mesh and set the Z location to -92. And you can see it all went down just a little bit. And of course, you're going to want to play test that in the game. Make sure that the feet look like they're on the ground. Okay. Another thing that I like to do is play with the camera a little bit. So I think the camera's too far away, and we can control that with, number one, the camera boom. Altering settings on the camera itself is far more rare than adjusting the camera boom. The camera currently is 400 units away from Aerodel. I'm going to change that to 200 units. And also, I'm going to set an offset on the y-axis so that it is more, it's not centered on her direct back, but it's going to be more like that over-the-shoulder perspective. So socket offset is what we want to adjust, and on the y-axis, let's offset that by maybe 50 units, okay? And we can maybe bring it up on the z-axis, I don't know, 12 units, maybe 15 units. We'll see. Compile and save, and when we play, yeah, that looks terrific. We can see our whole character's body, and if we want to zoom around and look at the character from different angles, we can still do that. The character can still jump and everything, but remember now, this character has their own character blueprint. So if I wanted to, I could set up the same notifies on the animation, and remember the walk-run that we did for the man can also be applied to Aerodel, but what you might want to do is to check that blend space to find out what her walk speed and run speed are. So if I were to be implementing that right now, I would go back into the Aerodel folder, into retargeted animations, and I would locate the blend space. That's going to be somewhere here in animations. So let's look for it. Animation sequences. Looks like a lot of these aren't saved. Idle. Animation sequence. Animation sequence. It might be in the, excuse me, it might be in the ABP folder. Let's see. Because that was the basic locomotion. ABP. And we want the blend space, which is right here. Okay. So let's look at the blend space for Aerodel. So if I hold down Control, it looks like Aerodel is walking at 94 and running at 375. So let's remember 94 and 375. So let's fix that. We can close the animation and go into Aerodel's blueprint, into the character movement component, and set the default walk speed, or the max walk speed, to, I think I said 94. That's her walk speed. And compile and save. Now we're going to go to the event graph and do exactly what we did before. Let's do left mouse. Oh no, I'm sorry, left shift. And we're going to get the character movement component into the graph. Pull off set max walk speed, like so. And that's going to take it up to 375 because remember, we defaulted walking. But to return it to walking, we're going to have to release. So off of character movement component, we can set max walk speed again. Also could have copied and pasted or duplicated that node and just set it back to 94. And connect the released execution pin. So now by default, Aerodel should be walking, and if I hold down Shift, Aerodel will be running. Looks really good. Hold down Shift, transitions very nicely. Aerodel can jump and land, and we've just switched out a character. Okay, so I would like you to attempt this and retarget to the man, retarget to Aerodel, and place notifies for any animation sequences for which you're going to need Foley sounds, footstep sounds. We might even add other notifies for maybe some of her accessories making noise and the cloth flapping. All of that is going to add even more realism to the character. All right? And just to remind you, we did that already for the man. Okay, so if I go to, I'm sorry, I meant to go to the third person folder where we created the man's character blueprint. In the world settings, we're going to go into the game mode override, default pawn class. If I switch that back to man, and we made this just using Manny's animation sequences. But believe me, there are much better animations to be had than just the ones that come with this template. And I think we proved that. If I were to retarget Quinn's animations onto Aerodel, it would not have looked nearly as good. So just learn this method until you can get this far. Now in class, I know that we ended off briefly talking about how to make an outdoor environment. I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial because this is already approaching, it's a little bit longer than an hour and a half. So I'm going to end this off right now and probably film another one tomorrow. So thank you all for your attention. I had a lot of fun showing this to you, and you can just watch this one little bit at a time. Don't be in a hurry, and it doesn't have to be done in one sitting, okay? Maybe the first time you watch it, you're just going to watch it passively and try to take in the big picture. See what you can remember. so that the second time that you're watching it and actually following along in Unreal, it's something that, oh yeah, I remember that part. You've seen it now twice. You've seen it in class, and you've seen it in this tutorial. Now, as always, if you encounter something that screws it up or whatever, you have many, many options. One thing that you can do, of course, and always, is to come to me for one-on-one help. I can help you in person on campus. I can also help you over Zoom if necessary, and if that's your preference. And you still have the Project Aerodel zip file. So if it got totally goofed up beyond all recognition, you could simply unzip that one more time and start fresh. Okay, I hope you have a lot of fun and look for another tutorial coming shortly. Thank you. Good night.